it has me about ready to bark at someone. If I see any Ohio State, if I see any scarlet and gray on Saturday afternoon in Massachusetts, of all places, I might just bark at someone in public. But yeah. Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome into Monkey Knife Fight's College Football Show Playoff Edition. I'm Dan Watkins. Joining me, as always, the great John McKechnie of Rotowire.com. John, the wait is over. We finally arrived. It's semifinal weekend. What better way to ring in the new year than with a little playoff football? How's it going, buddy?
We're doing good. I just flew back here to Atlanta this morning. Basically, dropped my bags and prepared for this wonderful show here. So, I mean, we're clicking on all cylinders. I'm excited. You can just feel the electricity getting into Atlanta. It's go time. Yeah, I'm really excited for this weekend.
Since you made your flight, I'm guessing you weren't flying Southwest and dealing with that disaster.
Correct. Yeah, I did dodge that. I'm a fairly loyal Delta guy, but I could be bought by any airline. But Southwest, yeah, tough look for those guys these days.
Very, very, very tough look. December is always a very turbulent month, sticking with the airline theme here in college football. I mean, so much has happened since we last talked before conference championship weekend. Transfers, coaching carousel, mock drafts are starting to pick up steam. And of course, it's bowl season. And what a night we just had on Wednesday, too, by the way. Starting with the epic comeback by Kansas, forcing overtime, 55-53, the final in the AutoZone Liberty Bowl now? Is that what we're calling it? And then capping off in the nightcap, our guy Bo Nix. I mean, silly question by the Fox play-by-play guy, too, by the way. When they're driving down the field, he goes, does Bo Nix have a little magic left in him? Of course he does. Oregon coming out with the win there. But do you have a favorite moment of bowl season so far?
Oh boy. Let's see. We haven't gotten the loveliest action thus far, but it's definitely picking up. That Arkansas game was crazy. I enjoyed watching ECU versus Coastal on Tuesday night. I tweeted out during that because I didn't have eyes on ECU a ton this year. Obviously following them, they got a lot of exciting players, but Holton Allers really entering his Jared Lorenzen era. Like, that's a hefty lefty right there that we're looking at. So he's done well by the Pirates for a long time. Good to see him go out on top. And yeah, I think the overtime madness in that Arkansas game yesterday was, bananas. I mean, there's really no other way to put it. Of course, I got Arkansas at -2.5. So I thought I was in for a laugher. And then with the stupid overtime rules, no chance of covering. Unbelievable. So I'm still reeling from that one a little bit.
Yeah, Rock Chalk Jayhawk, not doing many people a lot of favors there last night. But how is the confidence picks going? How are those going?
Pretty strong. Definitely dropped a few that stung, but we're looking good thus far. I'm going to recalibrate things probably later on after the show and see where we're officially at. Ole Miss, did not completely count on them not showing up last night. I really should have thought a little bit harder about that one because they really didn't show up for like the last month of the season, all things considered. So that one definitely stung. That was like an upper 20s type of pick. But we got some interesting games here for Thursday and Friday as well to hopefully recoup some of those losses.
Yeah, it should be a great weekend. The transfer portal. Let's talk about that for a minute. A few of the notables, Travis Hunter and a couple of the other guys from Jackson State following Deion Sanders to Colorado. Devin Leary going from NC State to Kentucky next season. DJ Oyungule leaving Clemson. He's headed to Oregon State. Do you have a favorite move or a most interesting move so far?
Well, and then, it's like the open secret, right? That Sam Hartman's probably gonna be wearing another gold lid next year in South Bend. So that'll be interesting. Kentucky getting Leary, I think that's a really strong move for them. I think Graham Mertz ended up at Florida or something, if I remember right. So I watched enough Graham Mertz having lived in Wisconsin. It'll be a little bit funny if he's actually starting for the University of Florida next year. It's definitely not a step forward. Probably going to have to retool the offense a little bit. I don't think he can do really anything that Anthony Richardson does. So that'll be something. But yeah, I mean, Colorado, obviously they've kind of like won the offseason, as it were. Does that always translate on the field? No, not necessarily. But there's a buzz around the Colorado program for the first time since when, like, we were little kids and they won the national championship and they had Cordell Stewart and stuff like that. Like, it's been a minute since Colorado was buzzy, and now we have that officially. So that's kind of interesting, especially when like the rest of the Pac-12 South can be a little bit sleepy outside of USC and UCLA. I know Utah always comes in there, but they're almost like a separate entity, really. So good to see Colorado at least having a pulse now.
Yeah. Do you think they'll actually be like a player next year? Do you think Coach Prime can actually get them to like be really relevant next season?
I'm fascinated to see what the win total comes out before the season. I'll have to look at what their non-con looks like, but my inclination is that it's not going to go well. My inclination is that that's such a big jump. Dion was cooking with such better ingredients than everyone that he was facing at Jackson State. That's not going to be the case, even if they've made some splashes. They were among the worst rosters talent wise in the Power Five this past season, and it really showed. So even with the additions, you got kind of just a top heavy roster, and you almost end up looking like the college football version of the Los Angeles Rams or something, where you have identifiable guys in a couple different spots, but your depth is garbage, and that's what loses you games in college football. So I'm skeptical that this works, at least in year one.
The Sam Hartman thing is really interesting, and I'm trying to temper my expectations and keep my excitement level down low with this one, because if it does happen, though, I think Notre Dame's going to be playing for the national championship next year. They have been an elite quarterback away for so long that they've had good rosters over the past 10 years. And next year, they're going to have a very good roster. If you add a top level quarterback like Sam Hartman to that offense with Marcus Freeman, I think Notre Dame's going to make some serious noise next season.
No, I completely see it. I think that they do need to. I think they had bad luck with their receiver personnel this year. I don't think that on talent it's a bad group, but I think that just like the injuries and everything before the season or during the season kind of hemmed in that passing attack. And you lose Buckner, who I guess we don't really know if he was all that ready to begin with. And Pine did a good enough job. You lose Michael Mayer, but you bring back some studs in the backfield and you open things up with Sam Hartman. At least we expect that that's going to be the case. And yeah, all of a sudden Notre Dame is very scary on offense. In addition to having the traditionally great offensive line, a defensive nucleus that's coming back, and Freeman can obviously call that side of the ball and scheme that up really nicely as well. So yes, Notre Dame will absolutely be a player this time next year when it comes to the semifinals.
Yeah, and they get Ohio State and USC in South Bend next season as well. The one big road game on their schedule is at Clemson, but we don't know what Clemson's going to be next year with Klubnik at quarterback anyway, and we'll see what Clemson can do as well as they try to get back to relevancy. It's draft season. It's draft big board season. Excuse me. Monday Night Football. In that game, we saw Mel Kiper's like his big board for quarterbacks. Will Levis at number one. What do you think about that?
So this kind of runs counter to a lot of the Twitter football circles that I run in, because everyone hates him. Everyone just thinks he sucks.
Well, yeah, he puts mayo in his coffee. How can you like the guy?
That's sus. That's very sus. I will give you that. That is absolutely, going in the con list of the pro con Will Levis evaluation. But I think that he was really banged up this year. And I think that it bears out in the numbers. He was a really effective runner in 2021 at Kentucky. The yards per attempt stayed about the same, and the completion rate stayed about the same, even though they weren't able to just feed the ball to Wan'Dale Robinson through the air this entire season. I think he had a bulky ankle. During that Ole Miss game, they showed him on the bench. The middle finger on his throwing hand was going the wrong way. I mean, that dude is so tough. I think he has a pretty good arm. He's unlike Bryce Young, he does have the NFL frame. And I know that that's been kind of overplayed or almost like debunked at this point, that the idea of the prototypical quarterback, but Levis does have that. And I think in a class that, you have questions about, Bryce Young is like a whole other discussion. I think that he probably is my number one quarterback for this year, but someone like a CJ Stroud, I'm not sure that the tools are there the way that they might be with Will Levis. So count me something of an optimist when it comes to Levis, and someone who doesn't balk and turn off my computer when I see a mock draft with him going high, because I can definitely see that being the case.
I mean, but is he a guy that you would bend over backwards for? Like, if you're the Houston Texans, obviously you need a franchise quarterback. You're probably sitting there at first overall on the clock. Are you taking him, or would you maybe go with like a generational pass rusher like Will Anderson?
Yeah, Anderson would be a strong one. They've pulled the switcheroo before on draft night. Everyone thought that they were going to get Reggie Bush and Samario
Yes.
Williams, and that ends
Yep.
up being the smart call for them. Who knows? Maybe they could continue the Carr legacy. Derek Carr seems like he's on the outs in Vegas. Go ahead and get him, and then take a defender, either Anderson or Jalen Carter with that first pick. So if I'm Houston, it's a kind of a crap year to be the number one pick and be quarterback needy, because I'm dubious on most of these guys. I could see a path for Bryce Young getting there, but I am worried about the frame and the size when it comes to him. With the football IQ, the arm, absolutely there when it comes to Young. But this isn't a Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields type of draft, and it's better than what we had last year with Pickett and a bunch of nobodies. But it's not a particularly banner year for quarterbacks, the way that maybe it was billed a little bit around draft time this past spring, where everyone's like, "Oh, it's going to be a lot better next year. Don't you worry." It's like, it's better, but that's a low bar to clear.
Yeah, I see we're already doing that with 2024. I've already seen like the Caleb Williams, Drake May 1 and 2 like thing going on. We'll save that for later though. We got playoff football this weekend. Let's get right into these matchups. Semifinal number 1, TCU, Michigan. It's the Fiesta Bowl. We got Michigan. This line has bounced between 7.5 and 8 the past couple of days. The over/under though has held steady at 58.5. 13-0 Michigan, the Big Ten champs. They're still riding high after that beatdown of Ohio State in Columbus about a month ago. TCU, meanwhile, they lost to Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game, but the committee says the Frogs belong. John, for me, this isn't really groundbreaking analysis here, but I think that this game will come down to which quarterback has the better day.
Well, I think that Michigan can absolutely still win with McCarthy being outplayed by Duggan, but at the same time, where this boils down to me really is, I think Michigan's defense is just going to suffocate this TCU offense. I think the defensive front maybe doesn't have the names like last year with Ojabo and Hutchinson, but they are scary. They're nasty. They're talented at every single level on that defense. It's really well schemed. I mean, for them to do what they did against Ohio State, super impressive. And I think that Ohio State was better built to hang with Michigan than TCU is. So I'm just worried that this TCU offense just doesn't get any sort of momentum going. I think they're going to try to do everything that they can. And Sonny Dykes, I'm sure, is deep in the playbook and everything, trying to figure out some sort of weakness in this Michigan defense to exploit. But I'm just worried that this goes south in a hurry for TCU, unfortunately. I think that most years we're treated to one of the semifinal games being kind of bad. I think this one's it.
All right, very good. Max Duggan, 244.5 passing yards. This is more or less on MKF. He's thrown for 245 or more in 9 of 12 games this season. I'm not counting week 1 where he only attempted 3 passes. Michigan, they ranked 23rd against the pass, 191.8 yards per game they're allowing through the air, but they've given up over 345 in each of their last 2 to Aiden O'Connell and CJ Stroud in those games. A lot of people here, I believe yourself included, are expecting Michigan to have a fairly comfortable lead in this one. Could that lead to just a lot of attempts for Max Duggan in the second half?
That's where I'm coming at it with. I think that this is definitely a spot where we could see Duggan have less than 100 yards at halftime, and he still clears them more by the end of this, because I don't think that Kendre Miller in this run game is going to be able to move the ball whatsoever on Michigan. So they're going to need to turn it to their Heisman finalist quarterback and pray that he can connect on some deep shots. And I think that there will be enough attempts there, especially later in the game, for Duggan to clear this one.
I like the more there as well. On the other side, you got J.J. McCarthy, 200.5 passing yards is his more or less. He's reached 201 in 6 of 12 games this season, but we have seen that he can sling it when he has to. TCU ranks 84th against the pass. They're allowing 235 yards per game. But since November, only one quarterback has thrown for 200 or more on the Frogs, and that was Blake Shapen of Baylor, who finished with 269.
Yeah, that was a good game from Shapen. That was a close call for the Frogs back in November. But yeah, with McCarthy, it marries up nicely with what I was saying about TCU earlier, likely being down. I think that Michigan is totally comfortable, and maybe in an ideal world for Harbaugh, he wins this game without McCarthy having to throw more than 18 passes. And I could see that. I think that some of his bigger yardage days, like the one against Ohio State, there was some fluky stuff that went on a couple of those. I felt like it wasn't totally legit. I'm not trying to like take away from McCarthy, but like that Michigan just simply doesn't really ask him to do a ton. I know things are different with no Blake Corum, but Donovan Edwards clearly not that big of a drop off at this stage. So I think that this is a ground and pound game from Michigan. We see McCarthy go less than this number.
And let's talk about Donovan Edwards. 105.5 rushing yards is his more or less here. No Blake Corum. It's his backfield. He's shown he is more than capable of being the guy. He has more than 400 rushing yards total over his last 2 games. Every game he's had 15 or more carries this season. He's been well over this number. TCU is giving up nearly 150 yards per game on the ground. I'm smashing the more here. How about you?
Yeah, it's steep to see that because you might look at his season-long numbers and be like, how's he going to get there? But no, this is a run-first team in Michigan. No Blake Corum. Stokes, I think, could end up being a contributor down the line, like next year. But this is the Edwards show in the backfield. And I think that Michigan, their offensive line is so good. They're just going to move TCU off the ball, open up those lanes for Edwards. And, I wouldn't be surprised if we see him clear this number on if we look at his 3 longest runs from Saturday. Like it could be that type of day for Edwards. So I'm all over the more as well.
And we got 21.5 fantasy points for Edwards.
Yeah, throw a couple touchdowns in there. Yeah, I'll take the more on that too.
Very good. All right. Kendre Miller, 74.5 rushing yards. He's reached 75 in 9 of 13 games this season. Michigan, though, they're ranked 3rd against the run, allowing just 85 yards per game. You already kind of hinted at it. Could be a long day for Miller.
Yeah, I'm very skeptical on Miller getting much going here. It's not all his fault. I think that the line just might be getting blown up and he has nowhere to run. So it's going to be an issue for him. I think that we see him average probably under 3 yards a carry in this one. It could be that ugly for the TCU run game, and I'm taking the less here and not really thinking twice about it.
All right. And how about Quentin Johnson? 75.5 receiving yards is his more or less. He's only reached this number in 4 games this season, but his stock is soaring these days. I'm seeing some outlets have him as the number 1 wide receiver to go in the draft in April. How do you feel about Johnson on Saturday?
For Saturday, I like him. I do like him. I think that, again, there's going to be a high passing volume. I think that TCU has some other guys. Like he's not a one-man show as far as their pass game goes, but he is their downfield big threat and also someone that can help move the chains and help TCU extend some drives, which they're going to need to do to try, just try to keep Michigan's offense off the field. So I think that there's going to be enough targets there, and Johnson, enough talent to his own credit, even with the Michigan top corner on him. I think that he'll be able to clear this. Give me the more.
All right. And how about a prediction?
Let's see. Give me Michigan 34, TCU 17, but it's not that close.
All right. So you got Michigan and the under. I'm going to go Michigan and the over. I think there's going to be some garbage points in this one. Give me Michigan 38, TCU 28, and the Wolverines are heading to LA. All right, moving on. Semifinal number 2, the Peach Bowl in John's backyard in Atlanta. Ohio State, Georgia. A lot of red is going to be in the stands here for this one. Georgia is favored by 6.5. The over/under is at 62. The Dogs, they're the defending national champs. They're 13-0. The SEC champs as well. The defense, not quite as good as last year, but it's still good because, after all, that is a pretty tall task to repeat what they did on defense last season. The Buckeyes, they got stomped by Michigan in their own building. They sat out championship Saturday, and they end up in Atlanta after the Pac-12 ate itself alive as usual. John, your thoughts heading into this one?
Well, I think that Ohio State, before they lost to Michigan, was pretty clearly the number 2 team in the country, and losing to, at the time, the number 3 team in the country. Even if it was at home, it's still a very, very good Ohio State team. And I think, to your point about this Georgia defense, they are a little bit suspect in the secondary. Obviously, like Nolan Smith, the senior pass rusher, he's out for the season with that injury. So, you do have to worry about the pass rush not getting home for Georgia, and therefore you have Stroud back there with time to operate, and that makes him a very, very dangerous man. And we saw there's a couple of different ways you could take a look at how Georgia's defense performed against LSU in the SEC championship game. You saw the big numbers in through the air, saw the touchdowns, and you wonder what was going on there. I think that there was some coverage breakdowns and some like you just kind of have to give it up to LSU, but they were also firing it way down the field. Like they were trying to come back from a huge deficit in that one. The defense playing a little bit softer in that type of setup. So I think that they probably use that type of that performance in December in the SEC championship game probably as big motivation for this one, because they know that Ohio State is going to be testing them through the air. I don't think Ohio State, especially with no Trevion Henderson, is going to get much going on the ground. So this game could be won and lost simply with how Stroud in this passing game does.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about how this one's going to come down to, can Georgia's secondary keep that Ohio State receiving core in check? Sounds like you agree as well.
Yes, and that's what undid Georgia the first time they played Alabama last year too, so that they don't get a second shot at Ohio State. This is a one and done type of situation here. So if Ohio State schemes it up, has their number the way that Saban and Alabama did in the SEC championship last year, then Georgia might just simply not have an answer for this one. So that really is such a huge factor in this game. I think that's going to determine a ton. It's really, that's how I distill it. Absolutely.
All right. Before we get into the contest for this one, there is something about this matchup that's just starting to bug me. And it's because I've been watching a bunch of pregame shows leading into this, but I heard someone refer to Ohio State as the underdog, trying to make that a thing, because they did the whole thing where they trademarked the over the summer last year, which I roll my eyes every time I hear someone say the Ohio State University, pronouncing it that way. It's probably because their alumni don't know how the word the is actually pronounced. That's just my thought there on that. But this has basically led me to rooting for Georgia and hoping that Georgia just spanks Ohio State Saturday afternoon. But have you heard this at all? And any thoughts on that?
I've seen it, I've heard it. You watch an NFL broadcast and they all, if it's someone that's a Buckeye, the Ohio State always, but the underdog. Oh boy, you can miss me with that. The idea of Ohio State being like these plucky upstart folks, get out of here. Like you are Ohio State. You've basically set up shop to where you can pull five-star recruits from Florida, from Texas, from California, you name it. So that they have no geographical recruiting barriers. It's a self-sustaining machine on the recruiting trail. I can't have any sort of thoughts where it's like, oh, these guys, they're like the Boise State of this year. Forget about it. That's a preposterous take from them. So I'm glad that kind of pushed you over the edge to root for my Bulldogs, but I would have hoped it would have been the 2-year professional friendship that we have cultivated here on this show. But I'll take it nonetheless.
Yeah. If anything, they should be calling themselves the underachievers. They were ranked number 2 going into the season. They were supposed to be meeting Georgia in the Natty, not in the semifinal, but because they couldn't handle their own business and beat Michigan for the second year in a row, losing to Michigan for the second year in a row. Now they're in this position where they have to go to Atlanta. And also, the conspiracy theories too, I've seen also floating around about having to go to Atlanta. Yes, the eye roll, I love it. It has me about ready to bark at someone. If I see any Ohio State, if I see any scarlet and gray on Saturday afternoon in Massachusetts, of all places, I might just bark at someone in public. But yeah. There we go. Very good. All right, moving on. Let's talk about some of these contests here on MKF. We'll start with CJ Stroud, 280.5 passing yards. He's thrown for 281 or more in 8 of 12 games this season. Georgia ranks 49th against the pass in the country, allowing 215 yards per game, but Georgia has only allowed one quarterback to reach this number against them, and that was Garrett Nussmeier in the SEC championship game where he threw for 294. So can Stroud do that as well?
I think he will. Again, I think that this is going to be kind of a one-dimensional attack from Ohio State. But if that's your one dimension, is getting the ball to Marvin Harrison Jr. and Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Kate Stover, that's a pretty good one trick to have. So I'm thinking that the more is absolutely in play. Stroud is definitely going to have the opportunity to hit this one, whether he can or not. That's a slightly different story. But I'm betting that he will. I think it's going to be tough for Georgia to keep a lid on those receivers for 4 quarters.
Yeah, I like the more there as well. I've seen like people are hyping this up as being like a historical statistical matchup between these two teams on offense and just how many points might be scored in this one. I like the more of 60 of more than 62 points in this one as well. So I think got to have a lot of throwing of the football. And I like the more for both quarterbacks. And that let's head to Stetson Bennett, 280 and a half passing yards. He's reached this number in 7 of 13 games. Ohio State does rank 15th against the pass somehow, 185 yards per game they're giving up. But I think that says a little bit more about who they've been playing this season and some of the less than stellar passing attacks in the Big Ten. How do you feel about Bennett?
This one's tricky because, like you said, Georgia can absolutely put up points. Stetson Bennett has done well for himself in a lot of spots this year with some pretty nice yardage totals. But, is Georgia going to be able to run on Ohio State? That's another question. And, that will kind of shape the offensive game plan here. My lean is to go less just because I do think that Georgia wins, so maybe a little bit fewer opportunities for Bennett to put it in the air. And I think it's also worth noting that this is by position group standards in the playoff. Like Georgia's probably third or fourth as far as its pass catching group is concerned behind Ohio State and TCU. Because I mean Bowers is great, of course, but McKechnie, he might not be at 100%. A.D. Mitchell has basically been a non-factor for the bulk of the season due to an ankle injury. So the tight ends are kind of the bread and butter of this passing game, and that doesn't speak to me mostly as like a big play chunk offense through the air. I'm taking less.
All right, very good. Moving on, Marvin Harrison Jr., 84 and a half receiving yards. He's hit 85 or more in 6 of 12 games this season. It seems like the Buckeyes are going to need him to ball out if they are to hang in this one.
Yes, and again, I like the more for Stroud, and really Harrison is the true alpha of this receiving group. And now we know officially that there's going to be no Jackson Smith and Jigba. We're going to see double-digit targets for Harrison, and it's going to be tough to keep him under 8 yards a target. So I'm taking more.
All right, Kenny McIntosh, 60.5 rushing yards for the Georgia running back. He's reached 61 in just 4 games this season. Ohio State is allowing more than 120 yards per game on the ground, though.
So Georgia has the deep running back committee that I think explains more why McIntosh isn't clearing this number with regularity. But in a playoff game, he is Georgia's best running back. He is going to get the most usage of that group. I don't think that they've been like saving Kendall Milton or Branson Robinson for this spot. I think that it's the Kenny Mack show with a little bit of Dejan Edwards sprinkled on there as well. So I'm taking the more for this one.
All right. And how about Brock Bowers, 55 and a half receiving yards? He's hit this in 6 of 12 games, but just once in the last 5. I like a big day for Bowers. How about you?
I do as well. I think he's just such a matchup nightmare for opposing defenses. He's too big for your corners, too fast for your safeties. It's just that's a problem. He's going to get fed. I could see a line very similar to what he put up against LSU in the SEC championship game where he had like 80 yards and a touchdown. I think that's more in line with where I see Bowers going Saturday night.
All right, very good. And how about a prediction? Are the Dogs heading to LA?
Are the Dogs heading to LA? I'm going to say yes. I think that Georgia wins this one 31-24.
All right, taking the under too, zigging when everyone else is zagging. I'm going to take the cheese. I'm going with the over, and I like big points in this one. Give me Georgia 41, Ohio State 33. The Dogs will play Michigan in LA next Monday night. But John, how about this? Let's rank the 4 title games of what you would most like to see to the least want to see.
So I would most like to see Georgia Michigan for obvious reasons, and I think also Michigan, a very worthwhile adversary, and there's a little bit of rematch magic sprinkled in there with the Orange Bowl from last year. Ohio State Michigan would be my second choice. Third would be Georgia TCU, but I don't think that most people would agree with that one. I think that's probably most people's fourth. And then Ohio State TCU would be the dead last. I don't even know if I could bring myself to watch that one, but I know I would. But I wouldn't even watch the pregame. I'd wait until kickoff at the very least.
Wow. That's big. That's big. Yeah, I'm going to go with Ohio State, Michigan would be my preferred title game that I would most want to watch just for a little redemption for myself or to double down on my prediction from the game back in November. Got a little bit of egg on my face after that one. Number 2, Georgia, Michigan would be a great one. Ohio State, TCU, I put at 3 just because I think Georgia, TCU, if somehow that is the national title game, will just be an absolute blowout and not much fun to watch.
Yeah, no, that could look a little bit akin to like the Georgia Hawaii Sugar Bowl from when I was in high school and like discovered that Georgia was a cool school to go to. And
Is that the Colt Brennan game?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Very good. All right. Any thoughts on the Rose Bowl, Sugar Bowl, Orange Bowl, any of the other ones?
The Orange Bowl could have been a really fun matchup, but
There's
understandably,
a lot of orange.
it's on brand, dude, big time. But so many star players are sitting out or injured for that one, so that's a little bit tough. I feel like the Rose Bowl is getting a little bit underserved. I know that because it's after the college football semifinals and it's on a Monday. Like maybe there's not that much juice to it, but Utah and Penn State are two excellent programs, talented, well coached. I think we're in for a excellent game. I'm not saying that we're going to get to that level of the 2016 Rose Bowl where we had USC versus Penn State, Sam Darnold's coming out party, Saquon Barkley's coming out party, but it's going to be a lot of fun in Pasadena on Monday. I'm really looking forward to that one.
Yeah, Monday has potential to be just a beyond fantastic sports day. You start things off with the Winter Classic at Fenway Park, the Bruins and the Penguins. You roll that right into the Rose Bowl with Utah and Penn State, and then you cap it off with Bills Bengals on Monday Night Football, which is by far and away the best matchup of the weekend when it comes to the NFL, in my opinion, because Sunday's slate, which I will be previewing with Nick Whalen, is just not looking good at all.
Yeah, it's rough, and we're getting treated to on Thursday night. Josh Dobbs in an NFL game, I think, is last I heard. So NFL kind of taking the week off. They're nursing it on New Year's Day for sure. But Monday night gonna be a lot of fun.
Yeah, who isn't taking the week off this week? Anyway, all right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit subscribe on our YouTube page at Monkey Knife Fight, and good luck on all your contests this week.